everybody, it's your old pal Mike. I hope you're happy, healthy, and safe. And welcome back to the channel because we are in for another Jaguar review. This time we'll be looking at the Fender Japan Hybrid 60s Jaguar. Now if you're wondering to yourself, what makes this hybrid? Well, you're in good company because I had exactly the same question, because from the outside this looks just like any other Japanese Fender offset. From the outside, it's got that distinctive Fender Japan shape and hardware complement, and really, the only tells are the locking tuners and the full-size Jaguar knobs. Otherwise, this really does look like any other CIJ or MIJ guitar that you're likely to encounter. But the differences between the standard models and the hybrid series, well, they go a little bit deeper than that, so let's get into specs. The Fender Japan Hybrid Series Jaguar features an alder body with a gloss poly finish, this time in one of my favorite Fender colors, Charcoal Frost Metallic. The 24-inch scale-length neck features a satin poly finish and has a distinctly U-shaped neck profile that fills the hand a little bit more than most MIJ or CIJ guitars. The neck wears a 9.5-inch radius rosewood fretboard with 22 medium jumbo frets and perloid dot inlays. The headstock wears vintage-style locking tuners and a bone nut. As for electronics, we've got the usual dual lead and rhythm circuits, although the lead circuit does have full-size US CTS pots. The guitar has a set of VMODS single coils made here in America. From the factory, these guitars are strung with 9 to 42 gauge strings. However, this wears a set of 11s and is tuned to E flat. Now let's talk about some things that I love about this model, and number one, it has to be that Fender Japan makes a hell of a guitar. As is the case with every other Japanese offset I have ever played, the wood is good, the basic fundamentals are all there, the weight is decent, the neck feels great, the workmanship really top-notch in most respects. And a big thanks to Fender Japan for using honestly one of my favorite Fender colors ever. Charcoal Frost Metallic is one of the rarest 60s colors. It was really only available in the mid-60s, and my god, is it a looker. Like, I cannot get enough of this finish. Yes, the metallic particles are a little bit bigger than they used to be, and that is really only a complaint that I would have. It's not a big deal. The color is bang on otherwise, and, you know, poly or nitro, who cares? It looks great. I also have to admit that I'm not much for satin finishes on necks. They tend to feel stickier to me than most nitro, and that may just be down to my body chemistry, but this one feels great. And to be honest, I have had a great time with this neck overall, from the feel and the shape, and the 9.5-inch radius. And I have to also admit that while this neck is a little bit bigger than I would normally go for, I have really enjoyed it. In fact, it's kind of close to the spare 63 neck that I have sitting around. It's a little bit fuller, a little bit bigger, not huge, not a boat neck, and it definitely fills the hand, or more specifically the perlicue, there's a vocab word for you, a lot more than most other Japanese or AVRI 62 necks that I tend to fall in love with. So if you're on the hunt for a slightly bigger neck with a U shape, and the U is definitely there, well then this neck might be perfect for you. As is the case with most Japanese Fenders, the fretwork is immaculate, and I'm always happy to see that. Although I will comment that the fret ends are a little bit bitey. I can definitely feel them as I run my hand up and down the neck, but I'm gonna chalk that up to shipping. You see, this did come directly from Japan, and that journey can wreak havoc on a guitar. That change in climate, heat, humidity, it spells disaster for a lot of good fretwork, so I'm not going to hold that against Fender Japan. I have seen that time and time again. It may not be their fault. And if you can see the Jazzmaster companion to the Jaguar behind me, well, the fretwork on that is perfect, so yeah, I'm going to chalk that up to shipping. I also have praise for the rosewood fretboard and the actual bone nut. I think I've gotten so used to seeing import guitars with Palfaro or Laurel and, you know, plastic nuts that I'm really pleased to see those features present on this model. And with a set of 11s tuned to E flat, this thing is a beast. It is so much fun to play, and I haven't even touched this one yet. Now, this guitar does come from me by way of friend of the channel and Patreon supporter Daniel, thank you Daniel, for some modifications that we will get to eventually. I probably won't have time to do a video on that. We are going to be replacing the vibrato and the pickups and a couple other components to really bring this one to tip-top playing condition. And that brings me to a few complaints. Number one. At this point, you should know that I'm not a big fan of locking tuners on any guitar. I just find them completely unnecessary when I would estimate that 85 to 90% of tuning issues actually come from a poorly cut nut or a poorly maintained bridge or vibrato. Those are the areas where I always start when I'm tracking down tuning problems. So already, I'm not thrilled about the locking tuners, although they do work just fine. So, you know, that's a personal preference thing. If you like locking tuners, this has them. Go for this. The real problem I have with these tuners has nothing to do with their basic functionality. It's where the string attaches to the tuning shaft. Because the string is attached at such a high point on the tuning shaft, there is virtually no downward force on the nut, which is crucial when it comes not only to tuning stability, but keeping behind the nut resonance at bay. Now, this can normally be addressed also by the way you cut the nut, and while the nut is cut properly, I really don't think there's anything that I can do to it to quell those behind the nut resonances. They're just going to be loud until I change the tuners, which is one of the first things we're going to do. I'm going to be replacing these tuners with Kluson style Goto tuners that will allow me to wrap a lot more string around the post, thus increasing downward force on the nut. Another complaint I have is actually the same complaint that I always have with Japanese Fender guitars, and that is the vibrato. Now, is it the worst vibrato in the world? Of course not. It totally works. A lot of people seem to enjoy them. They do have a lot less spring tension than the AVRI 62s or even, you know, vintage units that had the stiffer carbon steel spring. That is not up for debate. And while this may not be my favorite feeling unit on the market, it does work and it has been relatively stable as far as tuning goes. But you should already be hearing the big problem with this unit. Friends, we are nearly 40 years into Fender Japan offset production, and yet this problem persists. The problem being the fit of the arm and the Japanese collet. Unlike US and vintage arms, the Japanese arm is just a solid, straight piece of metal. There are no cutouts or indentations to help it lock in with the teeth at the bottom of its collet. And because there's no indentation or cutout on the arm, you can easily push the arm in so far that the vibrato starts bottoming out. That issue, coupled with the already poor fit between the arm and the collet, well, that means these are much more prone to rattle and noise issues, as well as just plain falling out while you're playing. I've seen that happen so many times at shows where someone goes to grab their arm and it just hits the floor. Nearly 40 years in, it feels like it's time to finally fix this. So Fender Japan, please, please fix this issue. And while I really do like this guitar, I have to comment on the use of Fender VMOD pickups. If you don't know what the VMODs are, they were rolled out in 2017 along with the American Pro line, a line which I did not like very much at all. In fact, I had some very strong feelings about the design and quality of those guitars. And I'm happy to say that most of those seem to have been addressed with the American Pro 2, although I haven't had my hands on very many of them, so at some point we will review those in the future. One of my biggest complaints with the American Pro line were the VMOD pickups. I find them to be incredibly dull, mostly because they are super overwound compared to other single coils, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that if you're used to the standard Jazzmaster sound, that's, you know, a lot of bite, a lot of, dare I say, jangle, the VMOD pickups are not necessarily going to give that to you. In terms of resistance, these pickups measure out at an extraordinarily healthy 7.9 in the neck and 8.7 in the bridge. For comparison's sake, Fender AV65 Jaguar single coils, well, they come out at 6.4 each. That is a huge jump in output level, and that, again, is not a bad thing. I like a good, strong pickup. But it also tends to be the case that the more you overwind a pickup, the darker it gets, and I would absolutely call these pickups dark. In fact, when I first plugged in to playtest, I thought I had the rhythm circuit on the whole time, and it turns out, no, this guitar is just that dark. And when I discovered the rhythm circuit was disengaged, well then I thought, oh, they must be putting like 250K pots in here. But no, they are full-size 1 meg CTS. These pickups are dark. Now, if you're somebody who plays a bright amp already, like you have a Fender Twin and you have the treble all the way up to 10, then these pickups might actually work for you. That might be the perfect place for these pickups to fit in. But if you're someone like me who uses already dark amps and likes to shave off high end wherever possible, these are going to end up sounding really dull to you. Now, to be fair, I did at one point roll up the treble on my Marshall to heretofore unreached heights of treble. That's 5 on presence and 5 on treble. That's outrageous for me. And it did sound a lot better. It sounded a little bit more like a Jaguar, but adding treble to a dark pickup is different than shaving off treble from a bright pickup. There is something a little bit lost in translation for me. So yeah, does this sound like a Jaguar? Yeah, sorta, but it isn't the Jaguar sound. So if you're looking for the Jaguar sound, I might recommend another model or different pickups entirely, which is fine, and that's what we're going to be doing to this one because the owner also finds it a little bit dull and dark for his tastes. But do I think they're terrible pickups? No. No, absolutely not. At least not in the way that I find the VMOD Jazzmaster pickups to be terrible and disappointing pickups. And do watch that review coming up if you want to see Mike rant. But as always, your mileage may vary. You may love these pickups, and that is great. And if you do, please don't feel like I'm telling you you're wrong. There is enough room for everybody and their individual tastes as a player to go around. So this is just my opinion, and they will never work for me. As for the hybrid designation, that refers to Japanese guitar and American components. So we've got the VMOD single coils, those are American, and the only other American component on this guitar, well, that would be the 1 meg CTS pots on the lead circuit. Every other component is exactly what you'd find on any other Japanese guitar. Now that's not a problem, but that is worth mentioning just in case you read the specs and you think, oh, I'm gonna buy this guitar, it's got all American electronics. No, it is just those two parts. You know, at this point in the filming process, it's dawning on me that this might be a very short review because I'm having a lot of trouble finding, sticking points or things worth mentioning because this is really just a solid guitar. Sure, I have my complaints about the pickups. I have my complaints about the fit between the arm and the collet on the vibrato. I have my complaints about the tuners because of the lack of downward pressure on the nut, but everything else is basically what I'd expect from Fender Japan, and Fender Japan truly makes a great guitar. Now, as always, you may want to replace some components. I know I would. I would probably upgrade the vibrato. I'd probably toss the pickups on any Japanese guitar because I find them to be a little bit thin generally and also unwaxed. They squeal a lot more than most other pickup sets on the market. And with as many great pickup makers as there are, well, there are just so many options, you may as well explore a little bit. But fundamentally, the guitar is great, the wood is great, the finish is great, everything else is top-notch. And most of my complaints really do boil down to preference rather than something being wrong with the instrument. So, do I recommend this? Absolutely I do, especially if you're the kind of person who wants something in the offset wheelhouse but wants to keep their normal amp settings. This might actually be a great model for somebody who plays a lot of other guitars in a set. Like if your main guitar is a Les Paul or a 355 or something along those lines, you're used to humbuckers, you want to plug in an offset, but you don't want to have to change your settings to roll off all the high end, this might actually be the thing for you. But if you are looking for a turnkey experience where you buy the guitar and you've got that perfect 60s Jaguar sound, you may want to look elsewhere, or you may want to factor in a new set of pickups to go along with your new guitar purchase. I just think that this is a little too dark to be a stock Jaguar sound. Not a bad Jaguar sound, just different. So in conclusion, the Fender Japan Hybrid 60s Jaguar is a great guitar and might fit the needs of a particular kind of player perfectly. It might be a little dark, and it might have some things that I think could be improved, but overall, this thing is great. And to be honest, I really enjoyed playing this thing. I loved that U-shaped neck. I loved the 9.5-inch radius fretboard. And overall, this thing is a joy to play. It's just that the pickups really did not do it for me. And in fact, made it difficult for me to come up with musical ideas that I felt adequately showed off what this guitar can do plugged in. It was a little bit of a struggle, to be honest. And that doesn't often happen. Usually, all of my sound samples are just made up off the cuff, and I'm pretty happy with the results, but those pickups made it really hard. So they are not for me, they may be for you. And if you get one of these guitars and the pickups just aren't doing it for you either, well, you have tons of options out there. There are so many great pickup makers on the market that the world is your oyster, and why not get a little weird with it? Put some lipsticks in here, put some burns in there, put hot rails in there, I don't know, but just so you know, don't let the pickups be a deterrent. Well, I've got some work ahead of me, so I'm going to get to that, including swapping out these tuners, the vibrato, and the pickups, but I appreciate you coming back to the channel again and again, for liking, for sharing, for commenting, for subscribing, all of that good stuff. It means the world to me, and doubly so if you are a supporter of mine on Patreon. Your support means the world to me. Thank you so much. In any case, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're taking care of yourselves and each other, and we'll see you in the next video.